A little girl vanished. Her body was found. But that was not the end of the story. Because after the murder, someone began leaving messages. Messages that made one thing chillingly clear. The killer was still out there, and he wanted people to know it. Welcome to Myth X-Ray. April 1st, 1988. Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was Good Friday, a quiet spring day. Families were going about their routines, children were outside, and in one neighborhood, 8-year-old April Marie Tinsley was spending the day like any other child. No one could have imagined that within hours, her name would become part of one of the most disturbing murder cases in Indiana history. April was known as a sweet and gentle little girl. She sang in the church choir, went to school, and was deeply loved by the people around her. That day, she had been outside playing with friends. At one point, she went back to get her umbrella. It should have taken only a minute. But she never came back. At first, her family did not immediately assume the worst. They thought she might be at a friend's house, or still somewhere nearby. But as time passed, worry turned into panic. Her mother checked nearby homes, spoke to neighbors, and searched the area. By evening, police were called. Soon, the whole neighborhood was searching. Officers went through the streets. Neighbors and volunteers joined in. Empty lots, roadsides, and nearby fields were checked. With every passing hour, the fear grew heavier. Then, on April 4th, a jogger made a horrifying discovery. In a ditch beside a rural road, he found the body of a young girl. It was April. The search for a missing child became a murder investigation. The autopsy revealed that April had been sexually assaulted and strangled. The news shattered Fort Wayne. Parents held their children closer. Doors were locked earlier. Ordinary routines no longer felt safe. One question haunted the city. Who could do this to an 8-year-old girl? Police moved quickly. They interviewed neighbors, collected witness statements, and followed every lead they could find. Some witnesses mentioned a blue pickup truck. Investigators also created a sketch of a man they believed could be connected to the crime. It seemed likely that April had been taken quickly, before she had the chance to scream or run. But no matter how urgently police worked, they still did not have enough evidence to arrest anyone. And then the case took an even darker turn. About 2 years later, a message written in crayon was found on the side of a barn. It was not random graffiti. It was personal, cruel, and deeply disturbing. The message referred to April's murder in a way that suggested the writer knew intimate details of the crime. He was not just aware of what had happened. He was enjoying the fear surrounding it. He even hinted that he could do it again. That message terrified the city all over again. If the writer was the real killer, then he had not disappeared. He was still there, still watching, still thinking about what he had done, still feeding on the panic he had created, and the messages did not stop. Over the years, more threatening notes appeared. Some were left near children's bicycles. Some were found close to homes. Some were placed in locations that suggested the writer had been watching young girls. In several of the notes, he referred to himself as April's killer. In others, he warned that someone else could be next. In some places, used condoms were also discovered. This was not just a murderer hiding from the police. This was someone deliberately tormenting an entire community. For families in Fort Wayne, life changed. Parents became more cautious. Children were watched more closely. The feeling of safety slowly drained out of everyday life. Streets that had once felt ordinary now carried a constant sense of fear. And somewhere in that same city, the killer was living like a normal man. What made the case even more frustrating was that investigators actually had forensic evidence. DNA was recovered from the crime scene, and later from some of the threatening materials as well. The problem was not a lack of evidence. The problem was time. Back then, the technology simply was not advanced enough to turn that DNA into a name. The truth existed, but it remained trapped inside the evidence. The years kept passing. 1 decade, then 2, then nearly 3. Investigators changed, leads dried up, and the case grew older. But for April's family, time did not erase anything. The loss remained exactly where it had begun. Police looked at different suspects over the years. Some seemed promising for a while, but the DNA never confirmed them. It kept pointing to someone unknown. Then, in 2018, the case finally broke open. Investigators turned to a newer method called forensic genealogy. Instead of trying to directly match the killer's DNA to someone already in a criminal database, they used public genealogy data, distant family matches, and family tree research. It was slow, detailed work. They traced bloodlines, followed relatives, and built generations of connections. Step by step, the search narrowed. Eventually, investigators focused on 2 brothers. One of them was John D. Miller. Miller lived in Grable, Indiana. On the surface, he did not look like the monster people had imagined for so many years. He seemed quiet, ordinary, forgettable. And that is one of the most disturbing things about cases like this. Real evil does not always look monstrous. Sometimes it hides behind the face of someone who seems completely normal. Police began watching him. They collected DNA from items he had thrown away. Then they compared it with the evidence from April's case. After nearly 30 years, the answer was finally there. The DNA from the crime scene matched. The DNA connected to the threatening evidence matched. Everything pointed to the same man, John D. Miller. When investigators approached him and asked whether he knew why they were there, he gave an answer that chilled everyone who heard it. He said, "April Tinsley." Just 2 words. After all those years, after all the fear, all the waiting, and all the unanswered questions, the man who had hidden in plain sight spoke the victim's name himself. It was as if he already knew the escape was over. Later, Miller confessed. He admitted that he had abducted April, sexually assaulted her, strangled her, and dumped her body. After nearly 3 decades, one of Indiana's most haunting child murder cases was finally solved. In December 2018, John D. Miller was sentenced to 80 years in prison. Legally, the case had reached its end, but for April's family, no sentence could ever undo what had happened. They finally had the truth. They finally had a confession. They finally had the man responsible. But they did not get April back. That is the hardest part of this story. Justice came, but it came late. And maybe that is why this case still lingers in people's minds. Because it proves something both terrifying and powerful. A killer can hide for years. He can blend in, stay silent, and believe he has outrun the past. But almost always, he leaves something behind. A mistake, a trace, a fragment of himself. And in this case, the very DNA he never thought would betray him became the thing that finally destroyed him. April Tinsley's story is not only the story of a murdered child, it is the story of a family that kept waiting, a city that refused to forget, and a truth that took nearly 30 years to come back to the surface. Some killers believe time will bury everything, that people will forget, that the case will quietly die. But some names are never forgotten. Some stories never stay buried. And some truths, no matter how long they take, always find their way back into the light. April Marie Tinsley was only a little girl. She should have had a whole life ahead of her. But in the end, her memory did what time could not. It brought her killer out of the shadows.